Hey, what is up guys? It's Lewpac here with another Albion Online video for you. And today we're going to be taking a closer look at the patch notes for the new Oberon update. A lot of people have asked me to do a video on this and basically just give my opinion and thoughts on the Oberon patch notes and what they're going to change in regards to day-to-day gameplay, how it's going to affect various guilds around Albion, and so on and so forth. So basically, without further ado, we're just going to get straight into it and have a look at what's going on in this update. Now, the Oberon update is possibly one of the most exciting updates for a while because it introduces new technology to the game, which will be the framework for the future of Albion. And before we do get into it, actually, I do just want to say, like, I'm so impressed with, since launch, the consistency and rate that the content patches have been coming. You know, not all of them have been amazing. Some of them have sort of fallen by the wayside, thinking of faction warfare and stuff, but that content could still be updated and salvaged in the future, so it's not lost. But the main thing is Sandbox are, you know, developing the game. They're actively improving the game and pushing it forward, which makes me think we're in for a good experience for those of us who are in it for the long haul. I'm looking at games like RuneScape and Eve Online. Eve Online didn't hit its max player count until 9 years after launch. So that gives you an idea of, you know, the more sandboxy, long-standing games. Those games have a long life cycle, and they, as the game gets better and better, hopefully it builds more traction. Anyway, on with the update notes. So the main feature of Oberon is, of course, these hidden entrances, random dungeons and dungeon maps, the new system that's being implemented. Now, this is such a big and exciting feature, it actually has its own video. So just go and check out my random dungeons video if you want to know more about those specifically. I will just say it's one of the coolest technologies we've had introduced to Albion. It's super fun content, and it's really going to spur open world activity and sort of guild ownership of areas as well. New creatures, chest shrines and drops, that all ties in with hidden entrances. Again, I talk about the chests and shrines in the random dungeon video. New creatures is always good to have because you know, just more variety of encounters, more content just makes the game more interesting for everybody. We've got new customizable graphic settings for the Unity engine, basically some new stuff you can tweak, and actually, having played the test server a lot, you can actually notice the graphical difference. It actually looks even nicer on ultra settings. I've only just started playing again with ultra settings. I used to play on medium with shadows off and stuff like that because of ZVZ performance. I don't tend to do mass ZVZs anymore. I kind of stick to 20v20 and below if possible, because that's what I find the most fun. So I've got the game on ultra, and honestly it's actually looking quite sweet. If you look closely at it, obviously the graphics are reasonably simple because of the amount of stuff that can be on screen at once, but the graphics are well done and I think they're quite nice. The new tutorial is something that also might get its own video in the beginner's guide series, because this is a huge change for new players, in my opinion. I've always been hesitant to recommend this game to the average gamer because I felt that the new player experience was really bad. You do a few little tasks and then the game just dumps you off in the starter town with no clue. And then people have to go to external resources like the Albion wiki or the forums or my YouTube guides to sort of learn a bit more about the basics of the game. The new tutorial is fantastic. It's well built, it's good looking, and it actually explains to the player exactly what the game's about and takes you a bit further into the game before sort of saying, hey, Sandbox, have fun. And honestly, that is such a big thing for me, because I feel like now I can put any average gamer into the game. They can follow the tutorial and understand the basics of Albion. So hats off to the guys that made that. On top of that, anyone who does the new tutorial or maybe notices it on the test server will see that there's kind of this new quest system with markers and like points, and it shows you the right direction. I really hope that quest system is sort of used as a foundation to bring in open world questing and adventuring, similar to something like RuneScape would do. I mean, although it is an open world sandbox, I don't think questing would be out of place in the game if done correctly. And again, more content is better. So We've got a list of improvements here. Optimizing performance is always good. Reducing the crafting time for artifacts and transmutation. Check that out. We'll talk about that later when we talk specifically about transmutation values. Tomes of Insight are now usable from the inventory. You don't have to equip them as a potion anymore. That's great if you're going to use 1,000 tomes. And it also brings them in line with the Adventurer's tomes and all the other tomes we've been getting that are soulbound. You don't equip them, you just use them from your inventory. And same with the silver bags. Performance for numerous spells and combat action. Again, not sure of the specifics of this, but we'll get a feel for it once the patch drops. Now the next one, visual effects showing stat counts, is huge. So you will have noticed on some of the videos, the axe and curse, the debuff, the dots, now have a little icon on the target. You have a number of skulls for the amount of vile curse stacks, and a number of blood drops circling the target for how many stacks of bleed they've got. But Rejuvenation, the nature staff, is also getting a stat counter. It's a big green leaf, it looks really clean and obvious, and honestly this is a huge quality of life change for nature healers. It's also a bit of a buff for their opponents as well, because they can see who's got max stacks and who to purge, but I honestly think it's still a buff overall to nature. Good to see more obvious visual cues in the game is really good, because the combat can be quite fast paced and quite confusing at times, so more visual cues as to what's going on is better. You know, more obvious spell effects without being overwhelming is good. But I really like these changes. I think they're super cool. The audio improvements, again, just gradual improvement to the overall game experience is always good. Just better sound effects. I haven't heard the actual food eating sound effects. I hope they're not too horrific. So, next up, we're gonna have to look at some big stuff actually. Patch and hotfix numbering is not a big change. They're just going to change the way they list the patches when they come out. So the next patch will be Oberon hotfix like 1.01, or it will go to Oberon patch 1, Oberon patch 2, so on and so forth. The reworking of fame values, gear unlock and related change. This is its own kind of thing, to be honest. This is kind of a big deal. So all mobs are going to give increased mob fame by 15%, and all gathering fame is going up by 50%, right? So that means you're just going to get more mob fame, you're going to get more gathering fame. However, they've also increased the fame requirements for specializations by 15% and gathering specializations by 50%, right? So what this means to you guys is when leveling up, you're now going to hit the tiers. You're going to increase your tool level for gathering, or the tier you can wear will increase quicker, 15% and 50% quicker, respectively. However, specialization will still take the same amount of time. So you'll unlock the gear quicker, but your specialization will still go up the same rate it did before. But by increasing the fame required, it also increases the LP requirement. So you will need slightly more LP than you did before to level stuff up. But overall, I think it's a good change, because players can progress to the higher tiers quicker. And being able to wear higher tier gear honestly does mean cheaper, cheaper gearing. Because instead of wearing 6.2, you can wear flat 8, which is a whole lot cheaper. You'll be able to unlock higher tier gathering tools, so gathering won't feel like such a crazy grind as it did before. Another big change we can see in this section is the change of the fame multipliers for certain zones as well. So blue and yellow zones are going to offer slightly more fame per mob as their multipliers go up, and the Hellgates themselves have had a 66% buff to their fame. This makes them much more attractive to go to, as not only will you find PvP and hopefully loot, you'll get more fame for your characters. Now, these changes don't affect specializations other than spending LP and fame credits. It will cost more LP and fame credits to level your specializations now, but you're going to be earning more fame credits. So it is a slight nerf to LP. That's the only thing I would say. I mean, you still get the fixed 20 LP a day, but other than that, it's no big deal. Faction Warfare Outpost capturing has received a slight buff to for the amount of fame you get, in line with the general fame increase. The arenas are getting a slight increase to the award. Again, 25% to those. You could still only do 3 rewards per day. The Tomes of Insight from Crystal Realms are getting a slight increase as well. I don't believe the ones from the Adventurer's Challenge are, though. And I'm not sure about the tomes that are going to be spawning in the random dungeon, so we'll wait and see. Silver bags, basically, they're not going to give you 37 silver bags now. They're going to give you more amount from each bag, but less bags. So just less clicking to do. And then Adventurer's Challenge and Gathering Journals and Fame Journals have all been adjusted in line with the Fame adjustment. So nothing too exciting here. Then we look at the Hardcore Expedition section at the end of this. And this is actually a massive change to Hardcore Expeditions. This is a super important change. So instead of the old kill the certain mobs and skip everything else, you now have to kill 80% of the enemies in an expedition as well as the boss. So no more skipping everything. You have to kill the majority of the dungeon or the hardcore expedition. Now, this kind of repurposes the challenge of the hardcore expeditions. They did nerf the silver increase by 50%, which was then reduced to 25% because they started making a loss. So in addition to killing more mobs, you're going to be given different amounts of time for each expedition. There's no longer a fixed 20-minute, 30-minute timer for bonus or no bonus. It now depends on the map and the level of the map. So it's basically supposedly balanced to the maps. I've done some testing, and some of the high-level maps, you actually get quite a lot of time. I saw 42 minutes for the bonus on one of the high-level maps. So what we're going to see actually is people spending longer in an individual map at the high end of hardcore expeditions, and the total amount of fame is actually going to go up because you'll be killing more of the dungeons. So you might actually get more value from a single map in terms of fame, but they're going to be tougher. You're going to have to kill some of these big packs that people have always been skipping. You're going to have to focus for longer, and you know, it's no longer possible to skip just to the boss of a map that, say, you don't particularly like, such as Three Sisters, because it doesn't give much fame. People would just kill the absolute minimum, get to the boss, and get a new map. You're now forced to fight a lot of the dungeon. It's got some quite hard pulls in there as well. I think they're going to monitor and adjust this because obviously with limited testing, it's quite hard to balance all of the maps. I'm sure the hardcore community will provide feedback on them, and the timers will be adjusted as we go. So that's the end of the fame section for the fame rework. So next up, we've got the starter towns being merged. This basically means with the new tutorial, there's going to be a sort of tutorial island and tutorial area. Upon finishing, you're going to find your way to one of the starter zones. You're basically, instead of being dumped at one, you're now going to choose a starting zone, but there's no longer this Highland Landing and Highland Cross area. So all of these starting crafting areas are going to be merged into just Highland Cross. So you'll still have the main town and the starter zone, but there won't be a third part to it anymore. So your banks in those areas will be merged if you have banks. If you have too much stuff in there, just contact a mod or write a support ticket if your banks are overflowing, and the individual stuff will be put somewhere for you. I can't remember exactly how it works. I can't imagine there's too many people with that issue, but I'm sure there'll be some. So Pve Combat Changes. There's a rebalancing to the faction bosses. Basically, they designed to make the faction bosses a little bit easier for small groups. And then they get a defensive buff as you go above 3 characters. They basically want more people to do faction warfare, so they've upped the fame on it. They've made it easy for smaller 2- and 3-man teams to do the bosses, and they've brought their HP down a little bit. So that's kind of good. I mean, I don't think it'll revitalize faction warfare, but it'll make it a nice, viable 2- to 3-man activity to make some faction points and get some fame. So that's pretty cool. Next up then, we've got the general mob updates. Again, this doesn't look like much, but this is a huge change. So reduce the aggro range of mobs, from 8 to 6 meters. and reduced the pursuit range from 60 to 40. So anybody who's ever done these AoE pull groups in the dungeons know that everybody has it down exactly. They pull all the mobs, get them in a clump, somebody frost walks, you drop the AoEs, bam, tons of fame. People are doing silly numbers in these dungeons, and this is a massive nerf to that. The aggro range going down is bad because people who were body pulling the mobs as they were running around gathering them all up now have to go closer or shoot them. And the pursuit range is down, which means you can't pull them as far. So basically, people are going to have to relearn the whole dungeon pulls from scratch. And I don't like this change because I think with random dungeons coming in, it leaves normal dungeons in a pretty weird place, especially with all the time people have spent learning these pulls and stuff. You know, this has really undone a lot of what they've put into it. So I'm not a fan of this change. I can kind of see why they did it, but I think it was a little bit unnecessary considering random dungeons are pretty much going to obliterate open world dungeons anyway. I can't really see the argument for doing open worlds over random unless you've got a really dedicated group that wants to do a massively long session. But again, we'll see how it plays out on the live server. Mobs can now drop loot up to 2 tiers above their own. This basically means you should be getting slightly better loot from stuff, and you know, it's more exciting killing stuff at tier 6 knowing it can drop up to tier 8 now. And added the materials loot, runes, souls and relics to faction capes, and to the roaming mob loot. So roaming mobs are the little individual and 2 and 3 packs, as well as the normal bosses and relic bosses that you're designed to be soloed in the open world. If you've got no one to group with, you run around killing them. They're going to be getting a load of this sort of secondary currency loot, and this is really cool for the solo guys. I mean, the fame's being buffed on them anyway. But just a little bit of extra treasure. If the relic drops are reasonable, it's going to be pretty legit to farm relics off these guys. So we'll see how it goes, especially with the transmute changes that are coming up. We'll talk about in a bit. It's a huge deal, really. There's some slight changes to various mobs around the place. There's nothing too exciting, except the Earth Mother fight has been reworked. So not fought her for quite a while, but we'll see what the changes are. I won't go into all the individual mob changes. They shouldn't have too much of a dramatic effect on the gameplay experience. However, dungeon changes will. To prevent people sort of logging out when their scout sees hostiles in dungeons now, the logout timer has gone from 1 minute to 5 minutes, and the invulnerability bubble in dungeons has been changed dramatically. If you move more than 10 meters, it drops. You don't get a bubble when you log in, and it breaks after 10 seconds. So basically they want to make it a little bit less easy to escape dungeons or just completely avoid PvP by logging out. I mean, you could still A out and get a bubble outside of the dungeon, so we'll see how it works. Again, this is all balancing that might change in the future. I really don't know how it will play out. It's not going to be obvious until we see it in action how relevant the dungeons remain. The resource changes are quite interesting. Everybody knows there's a bit of a bottleneck at tier 5 resources, and so they've nerfed tier 6 respawn from 5,300 seconds to 10,000 seconds, and this is to balance the flow of tier 6, because the new aspect guardians and the world guardians bring so much tier 6 into the world that they kind of wanted to nerf the individual spawns. They lowered the harvest time from resource critters, such as the rock elementals or elementals, by 50% to make them more attractive to gatherers. They still don't give any sort of fame credits if you're wearing your gathering gear though, which is kind of sucky to waste all that fame. But it's something, especially for the tier 7s. Like, gathering them 50% quicker is really, really nice once you hit Grandmaster in your gathering tier. And added more tier 7 and 8 to the resource hotspots, and turned all the tier 5 critters in the hotspots to tier 7. That's pretty good. A lot more 7 and 8 because it was dramatically reduced when they took the tier 8 resources out of territories. There was a massive reduction in the T8 in the world. It was concentrated on certain areas, and now those zones are sort of heavily controlled by guilds and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how much they've put in the world. I still would like it spread out a bit more and not centralized, and I wouldn't mind seeing a small introduction of tier 7 to the Royals. I think to keep tier 8 in the Outlands, but maybe bring a bit of tier 7 into the Royals could make it fun. We'll see how it goes. Next is quite a big change then. We're going to talk about this one, the transmutation and crafting changes. So there's a bit of quality of life. Basically, it took ages to change runes, souls, and relics. There was no reason for it to take ages. They've sped it up dramatically. Same for rolling for artifacts with your runes, souls, and relics. That's just a quality of life change. But what's a massive change is the transmutation costs. So there's been a massive reduction in the transmutation costs for turning runes into souls, souls into relics, and resources into a resource of the next tier. Now, a lot of people get confused about the place of transmutation in the game. Everyone is always, oh, transmutation's so expensive. Why would anyone ever do it? It's just stupid. And now the job of transmutation is not to be an active mechanic. The job of transmutation is to set a maximum price, like set a hard cap on prices for certain things. And of course, you know, the reason for this is, for example, somebody could buy up all of the 8.2 metal bars and ore if they had enough money and literally set the price for them. And people would be forced to not get any 8.2, or they'd have to buy at this ridiculous price. Now, transmutation ensures that the price can only ever be X, which is the transmutation cost. Because otherwise, if somebody's overpricing their 8.2, players will just get 8.1 and transmute it instead. So that's the purpose of transmutation, setting a hard cap and making sure that there's no hyperinflation on certain materials. Especially for the lower tiers, that sort of the tier 5, which is very high demand, is the total bottleneck for resources. It's very interesting. And they've absolutely slashed the cost of transmutation. And they've changed it so instead of 20 runes into 1 soul, it's now 1 for 1 and you pay a silver cost. So they're dramatically reducing the cost of souls and relics, as well as dramatically reducing the cost of the rarer materials. And that's going to mean, you know, gear becomes more accessible. Relic gear in particular, which is quite a bottleneck for teams looking to get into the GVG scene, is going to become more affordable because the relic price is going to be down substantially. There'll be more relics rolled. Couple this with more relics dropping in the open world, both through random dungeons and the buff to overworld loot. For the roaming mobs, their relic drops and soul drops. More artifacts are going to be generated, the costs are going to come down, and I think that relic tier of gear that so many people see as a stumbling block for GVGs, that's going to massively reduce in price. This is a big change. Like, it doesn't seem like a massive impactful change, but once it plays out, like, it's going to be crazy. And it's also, I think it's going to be a nerf to the value of the highest end resources, but it's going to be a buff to the flat resources as well. Being able to transmute them into 8.1 or 7.1 from flat 7 or flat 8 is really nice for open world gatherers who maybe don't have their guild about. They can't sit on a node and keep an eye on it and wait for it to enchant. They kind of have to gather it flat and move on before gankers or, you know, the guild that owns the local area finds them. So it's really nice for them to be able to actually still get enchants out of it without it being an absolute outrageous price. Again, the knock-on effect on the market will be seen in a few weeks or months' time as it goes on. But that is a really huge change to the economy. So other little changes, 8 new achievements, opening the world from an instance cluster will now show you the cluster you entered from. Tomes of Insight no longer benefit from buffs, so anybody who's been stockpiling tomes waiting for the next fame buff, hard luck guys, you're not going to get one on your tomes. I also know that tomes can be used for your inventory now, I think we mentioned that earlier. With the upcoming portal changes, which I'll make a separate video on, ready for Season 6. The Royal Cities now have separate banks and marketplaces, similar to Carnian. I still don't know if they're going to get a black market. I hope they do, because it's a bit unfair if they don't. We'll see how it works. Crafted weapons no longer auto-equipped. That's just a nice quality of life. And then there's some chat spam. Little combat balance changes. The arena cap goes down. Doesn't really affect much. Just stops mass overgearing again. Execution time is up by half a second, and any damage now cancels it. So with dungeon fights and stuff like that, it should be a little bit easier to protect your downed teammates from executes. Sticky potions, 30 seconds off the cooldown. Probably still isn't going to be enough to bring sticky potions back in the meta, but honestly, thank the Lord, because that meta was horrible anyway. A quick change at the bottom, very hidden down here, but the healing sickness debuff, when you have 2 healers healing the same target, has been almost doubled from 14 to 26. So this is quite a big nerf to double healer setups that we see in GVGs and Hellgate sometimes. So yeah, they're obviously not happy with the sustainability of double healer and wanted to make it a little bit more difficult to play. I mean, I think it is still viable, but it's nice to see a little nerf there, because particularly in low IP cap GVGs, it's pretty frustrating to play against. And then there's a few little fixes to sounds, no fame for transmuting anymore, some zoning bugs, and some visual animation, audio, terrain, and localization fixes. So that is it for the Oberon patch notes review. If you're still with me, if you haven't fallen asleep through that, sorry it was a really long video, but there is actually some quite substantial stuff here that does have a massive knock-on effect in the game. That's it then. For me, I hope you've enjoyed it. Oberon drops tomorrow. I am absolutely hyped. I'm going to be streaming all day. I hope you can tune in. We got some gold giveaways. I'm going to be doing some gold giveaways on Twitch. I've got 3 normal starter packs and a legendary starter pack to give away as well. If you don't have the game yet, there's a chance to win. And I'm also going to be doing one just for the YouTube people, so there'll be a gold giveaway on the next video. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below your thoughts on the patch, and I'll see you next time.